To the Football Fans Show. I'm joined by my friends, Steve, Jack, and Carlos, and we're going to be talking all things Chelsea. So we've got things to talk about here. So Chelsea themselves, let's look at their situation. Right. So they had two transfer windows where they couldn't buy anybody, which is fair enough, because they've had some breaches. FIFA put that ban on them, and then they come back and they can buy loads of players, and they came back roaring. All these players you can see, they bought them. These are the kind of marquee players. They bought Kai Havertz, 72 million. He's a attacking midfielder. Timo Werner for 47 million. Ben Chilwell from Leicester, left back. Brought this guy here. What's the name? Hatim Ziyech, Ajax, 36 million. Mendy, he's not even there. The goalkeeper, 21 million. Bought a couple of free guys. Thiago Silva from PSG. And another guy, Malang Sarr. He was free as well. Two centre backs. Here we are. We've got some amazing players bought in. Lots of money spent. Over 200 million pounds spent. 200 million euros spent. And yet the results have not been great. So far, Chelsea have been out of the Carabao Cup, which happened last night. They've had one draw, one win, and one loss, which isn't great. They're ninth in the table, if I'm right. They're ninth. That's not a great situation to be in at all. So let's talk about it. So we'll start with Steve. So where's things going wrong, or where's things need development in the Chelsea side?
Oh, hi, Malcolm, and evening, gents. Well, I think the thing is, it's the unusual start to this season. I think has scuppered a number of teams. Normally, before the Brighton game, Chelsea would have probably had 4, maybe 5 pre-season games where you begin to build up players' fitness and the connections. And there's no substitute for match play against other teams, I don't think. And I think it's interesting. Chelsea had one pre-season friendly. I think they might have organised another one after the season started for squad players and the loan army behind closed doors, but effectively one first team pre-season game, which ironically was against Brighton as well as being their first league opponents. And I just think that the team are a little bit underdone at the moment in terms of their preparation. I don't think we're unique in that. I think that you're seeing some maybe some funny results, or maybe some teams who did manage to fit games in against teams who didn't. And I think until we've probably got to 5 or 6 games into the season, you won't see teams on an absolute level playing field. Bearing in mind, Chelsea's season finished a little later than most teams because they had to play Bayern Munich in that one other game. So that was probably an additional week on the season. And although the teams that actually got to the final stages of the knockout European competition, so Wolves and Manchester United and so on, Manchester City got that extra week to prepare for the season. They got given at the other end. Chelsea didn't. They kind of fell in between the two. They finished later than everybody else, but they didn't get any extra time to start. So I think more than anything else, it's probably a question of preparation. I do wonder if the club could have managed more pre-season friendlies. I think Liverpool managed 4. But I don't know. Jack, what do you think? Do you think we're underdone?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's always going to be the case of when you're trying to fit in so many new people, it takes time, even with a normal pre-season. You see it quite often. It takes a while for a lot of new players all sort of to bed together. So, yes, we are looking a little underdone. The results aren't particularly great as things stand, but I'm not particularly panicked as it goes. I mean, if we're talking about the league results, I mean, the loss we've had is to one of the most consistent teams over the past couple of years, who, it pains me to say, are absolutely fantastic in terms of Liverpool. And so, it wasn't the worst team to lose to, if in that sort of sense. And a case there was individual mistakes made at West Brom, but we still managed to actually fight back from 3-0 down. That's actually sort of quite a positive thing to be able to sort of take out of it. Granted, you look at it before the match and say, yeah, we should have enough to get through this game and actually sort of win it. But it is what it is. As you say, it's not a unique situation. It's interesting that there seems to be like a record number of goals each week. The amount of goals being scored is way above normal, and particularly on a consistent weekend by weekend basis. And I think that feeds into what you're saying about every team's going through this, because it has been such an unusual start to the season. And, we've had a little bit of bad luck here and there, and, that's kind of the reasons why it's not working out quite just yet.
What's your thoughts, Carlos?
Well, I agree with Steve and Jack, because if you haven't had a pre-season, obviously that's going to damage you. And on top of that, if you've brought in so many new players, how is that team going to gel? They're going to have to do their pre-season once the season has started. So Chelsea's first pre-season game practically was against Brighton in the league. And the team has to find its feet and find the right system, because obviously Lampard has got his squad, he's got his new players. I don't think he knows which is the best system yet. How can he? These players have not played together. For instance, Timo Werner, everyone was saying he was going to be centre forward. You remember, Malcolm, that I mentioned when he first signed that I think he's more a left-sided attacking player. Now, what might happen, and I was not surprised to see that this is what Lampard did yesterday. Werner played on the left, and Giroud played at centre forward, which is something I mentioned might happen. So he will find, Lampard, the right place for the right players and the right system. There's only 3 matches gone. I don't see anything wrong with Chelsea. I've heard someone on Spanish TV, for the sake of Jack and Steve, I'm in Madrid, and someone said that because they've spent so much money, that Chelsea have a duty to fight for the title. I don't think they do. I think the only duty Chelsea has, the only obligation, is to maybe create a team that might fight for the title next season. This is just a process which will not be fast. It's going to take time. They're building for the future. These are relatively young players, and they're building a team. So all they need to do this year is finish in the top 4, because they managed that with kids last season. And with the new arrivals, I think they've got to do the same, and then maybe mount a challenge, but not necessarily before.
Yeah, I get
Pick
it.
up on that, Malcolm, if you don't mind. I actually sort of said similar sort of thing to Malcolm in a conversation we had last week. It's everyone sort of said, "Oh, last year was building, and now we've been able to spend. We should be able to go out and sort of win the title." And I've always said, "Well, no, last year was a holding pattern while we couldn't build. It was just a case that we had to survive somehow. I think we overachieved and did very well, getting into 4th place. And this year we've brought all these people in, and now it's that building phase. Now, granted, with the money we've done, we should close the gap on Liverpool. We shouldn't be 30 plus points behind them at the end of the season. I think if we are, then we've underachieved. But even if we closed it, if we halve that, but we're still 15 points off, and by the end of the year, that's actually closing the gap quite significantly. I mean, and I know already we're falling behind, and what were the results we got? So it is going to be very sort of tough. Just closing that gap and being closer to them by at least sort of 15 odd points, I think would be a reasonable expectation for the year. And then you say, Carlos, from then next year, looking to, by that point, we'll know who's in their best position, how the formation works, and just hopefully a couple of little extra tweaks here or there, or a bit of extra squad depth or something, to then really hopefully, touch with challenge for next year.
I think, Jack, what gives me kind of confidence for the season is there is a step up in quality in the squad in pretty much all the departments this season. Certainly now we've signed Mendy. I think it was painfully obvious to everybody last season that Kepa, for whatever, let's not forget Kepa still, I think, is, or certainly was until very recently, in the Spain squad, and indeed at times was keeping David De Gea out of the Spain team. So he certainly was a highly rated keeper. I think what we saw, for me, the most kind of, if you like, iconic moment of having no crowds in the ground during a game was in the 5-3 game at Anfield towards the end of last season, after the restart, where there was Robertson had a free kick from the left, and he floated it over to the back post, and you could hear, because there was no crowd noise, all the defenders calling for Kepa to come and claim the ball, and he stood on his line, which is kind of default position for a ball that's going into the box. And I think undoubtedly we already saw in the game against Tottenham, Mendy's not got his feet, super glued to his line. He will come out, he will try and claim the ball. And okay, he missed one, maybe made a hash of one, but he claimed many more. And I would much rather have a goalkeeper, and I think the centre-backs would much rather a goalkeeper who's going to come out and try and claim the ball and usually be successful. Let's face it, keep usually will. They drop the odd one or they miss the odd one. Well, every goalkeeper does that. But if you're not going to come and claim them, then you put your centre-backs and your full-backs into a whole heap of trouble. I think if you add Silva's experience at centre-half, as something, and that experience of leading a back four, which I think was probably missing from last season. And then you had the quality of Havertz as an attacking player in the midfield area, and you had the quality with Ziyech wide, who I think is probably, in terms of creative in the final third, is a step up on Pedro and Willian. And then Werner obviously has got more goals in him. I mean, he's a goal scorer. He got his first goal against Tottenham, first for the season, but he looks like he'll score many more to me once he's settled. And Chilwell, of course, as well, adding quality to the defence. And I think Marcus Alonso's performance against West Brom, and indeed Emerson's performance in the back end of the game against Tottenham, demonstrate why Chilwell's a very important signing. So for me, I think that the talent has stepped forward with the acquisitions. It's not been a Papi Djilobodji summer where we've just bought warm bodies that fill out the squad. It's been a summer where we've actually invested in high quality players. So that for me tells me that, as you say, Jack, we should close that gap. I mean, Liverpool can't go much better. They can't get many more points than they did last season. So they can't really take a step forward. So we should see that gap diminish, I think. And I think even replacing Kepa is probably going to be worth at least 10 goals in the goals conceded column for us in terms of improvement. I think that the metrics show that he underperformed by 11 goals last season. And that's huge for a goalkeeper at the top flight, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I'm going to play devil's advocate here, boys. So you're saying about the fact of preparation, okay? I know you brought a lot of players. There's no doubt about that. But a lot of teams have had the same time you've had to prepare for the season. Now, the pre-season situation has been odd for everybody. So you finished late, but other teams finished late as well. So they've had people coming in, the people above you, Arsenal, Villa, everybody. Everton in particular have been sensational. And they've got a new manager, obviously an experienced one. Your former manager got you the double. Brought in players, he's done, I mean, like I was telling even Carlos, I'm scared to play Everton. They're so amazing at the moment. And so I don't know if that's really something you can fall back on. I appreciate people need to bed in, get used to the way that things are played in this country. But surely you would be expecting more. I appreciate you saying about closing the gap and stuff. But I mean, from what I've seen, I haven't seen what I thought I would as far as the invention and kind of hitting the ground running. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong here. I mean, Carlos, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, what I would say is that, for instance, against Brighton, and this proves that Lampard is experimenting, and he's had no choice but to experiment once the league has started. He put, in a 4-2-3-1, he put Havertz wide in that line of three. That is not Havertz's best position. He cannot backtrack, he cannot tackle. So that meant that wing was going to be fertile ground for Brighton's attacks. And that put a lot of pressure on the fullback from that side. I don't know if it was James who was playing that side against Brighton. Yeah. But anyway, Havertz played on both sides, so he really put pressure on both fullbacks. But Lampard must have realised then that Havertz cannot play there. He can either play attacking midfield, he can play just behind the striker, or in the final games of last season for Bayer Leverkusen, he actually played as centre forward. And he did brilliantly and scored goals. So anywhere where he doesn't have to tackle, and you will see a fantastic player. And that's why I'm saying that Lampard is learning as the league goes on. And unfortunately, that might mean Chelsea will drop points. And unfortunately as well, the Liverpool game came too early. If Chelsea had played Liverpool, say, in December, I'm sure we would have seen Chelsea put up a better challenge. It turned out to be easy at the end of the day. But Liverpool, yes, we're saying that all teams have had the same pre-season, but this is the same Liverpool side. They've got nothing to learn from each other. They're settled. So, they've got 2 years or 3 years on this Chelsea side.
No, fair point.
What you said, Malcolm, does bear weight. You're quite right. It can't as such be used as an excuse. I mean, Everton are probably the exception to that. I mean, it does. Sometimes it clicks. We've had that before with various players coming in and what have you, but usually that's more the exception rather than the rule. So it's very much I think those who have made sort of lots of investment and brought in lots of players to their squad are tending to find it a little slow going sort of early doors. And I mean, saying that, I wouldn't also say that it's been perfect. Things like when we started last season, we had a bit of a problem in terms of the fact that we weren't really playing games for 90 minutes. We'd either play a good first half and then we're bad in the second half. We'd have an average first half and then we're better in the second. We seem to have gone down that route this year a bit as well. And the Tottenham game was probably the best example of that. We were fairly dominant in the first half, but half of that was probably down to the fact that Tottenham was so poor. When they came in and stepped up in the second half, we just didn't know how to up our game at that time because we were still trying to work out our team and our formation and what have you. But even in like the Liverpool game, we had plenty of chances. If it hadn't been for Kepa's awful mistake to gift Mane his second goal, if Jorginho had tucked away his penalty, if we'd taken somebody else's shots, I know ifs and ands, and everybody can say it in just about every game of football there's ever been, it might not have been such a bad performance, as it were. So there's been some fine margins to some of this. But, so what you're saying is correct. You could still expect possibly us to come in and do a bit more. And we are still trying to find the feet. And also, as I said, sometimes I think like Lampard needs to tell the team to play with a bit more intensity. Again, while he was dominant in that first half against Tottenham, it was slow. Now, what we've bought in terms of the players and looking like we've got a plan for going forward is we want to be lightning fast, moving that ball forward, getting in behind the lines and really attacking that goal. Yet against Tottenham, we were particularly, this is the way Jorginho plays, and he was the metronome in the pivot of midfield. The ball was just going backwards and forwards, side to side, like that, rather than being put forward to goal for someone like a Werner who's just greased lightning to run onto. Play a ball through the channels, he'll get onto it. Yeah, it was this slow build up side to side, going back this side, looking for a little opening to try and probe and go, rather than trying to force an error out of the team and actually get something to happen. And I think once we get sort of a bit more used to each other and realise that, then hopefully we'll start to see these better performances coming. These better performances will bring better results as well.
Yeah, I think I would say about the Tottenham game, I think it was a bit of a classic Mourinho rope-a-dope setup, though, to be honest, in that game. And I think there was an element of that where Tottenham were quite happy for us to come onto them, and they backed their ability to keep us out essentially in defence, and were quite happy to let us play and blow ourselves out. And then they stepped forward a bit more. They were more on the front foot in the second half, and the game changed momentum. So I think you're right. We were the better side in the first half against Spurs, but I don't think Mourinho was going in at half time in that game thinking my game plan's up the pitches here, I'm going to have to do something different. I think the game was unfolding as he was expecting it to. I suppose you're interesting, Carlos, when you're talking about Lampard looking for his formation and trying things out. I thought he played Havertz on the right against Brighton, partly because he wanted to get him on the pitch, and I think he wanted him to play in a position where he wouldn't. Playing him wide right would mean he probably was less centrally involved, and he was able to kind of experience the game rather than be forced to run the game in his first appearance. And I wondered if it might have been a way of easing him in a bit, particularly as well with the players that weren't available, the opportunity to do that. And also I think in that Brighton game we have to acknowledge that Chelsea were not helped in the first half at all by a really poor performance by Loftus-Cheek, who was unable to retain possession, unable to win any duels, and really played very poorly. It was no surprise he went off, and it's obviously a bit of a worry for me that kind of performance from Loftus-Cheek is still happening. But I think for me, Lampard's tactical setup is quite interesting, and I think you're right in as much as he doesn't quite know the right formation, but I think the right formation is probably evident given the players that he's got. And I think his difficulty is playing a two-man deep midfield, playing a double pivot there. I just don't think we've got the right mix of players at the moment who can play an effective double pivot. And by playing two players there, you're taking, given that you've got a back four behind them, you're taking out somebody from the line in front of them. And I think I personally wonder if he'd have been better off this season saying, guys, our go-to formation is going to be 4-3-3. So we're going to start playing 4-3-3. It might not be the ideal formation later on when we're settled and we've gelled. we'll start to mix it up a bit. Maybe sometimes play a double pivot if we feel we've got the players and the opposition to do it. Maybe sometimes play 3 at the back, etc., and all those things. But actually, just really try to get them to knit together in a 4-3-3. And I think in a 4-3-3, we have Kante that can play that deeper midfield role and give the players ahead of him license. So yeah, I mean, I've got some other things to say about when we play 4-3-3, but I wonder what you think about that, chaps, in terms of maybe we should have stuck to our knitting a little bit with a formation until there was a level of ease and until the players realised that they can slip Werner in with the first ball and he's going to get on the end of it and he's going to score, and they haven't got to wait until he runs offside and then pass to him.
Yeah, can I just jump in there? Because I think he's absolutely right, Steve, because Chelsea played 4-3-3 most of last season, but then he finished the season playing a 3-4-3. And now he started the season with the new players playing 4-2-3-1, which shows that he doesn't really know what system to use with these players, because he doesn't know these players. He hasn't trained with them much. He hasn't seen them play much, I'm sure, because managers don't get to see that. That's why you've got directors of football who do the signings, because managers, they're more involved in their team. They haven't got time to be watching other teams. So he probably hasn't seen Kai Havertz enough to know where he should be playing. It's only now that he's learning. And in a 4-3-3, I do think that Havertz can probably play on the right, but not in a 4-2-3-1, because there's that gap between the fullback and the left side, the right-sided, whichever side it is. With the 2 pivots, as you say, it's more difficult to cover the sides. So it means that the player playing on the wings in that 4-2-3-1 does have to cover more ground defensively.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think the reason he's probably gone for 4-2-3-1 is when you look at the players we've bought and you're trying to really think about, I mean, obviously we're talking about whether it's working at the moment, and maybe we should have gone horses for courses and started 4-3-3, considering the players unavailable to us as things stand. But when you look at thinking everybody's sort of fit, you've got to think you've got a choice between Abraham and Werner up front. Then you look at probably 3 behind them, and you're looking at then Werner again comes into that. Mount, Havertz, Pulisic, Ziyech. There's a lot of people fitting there into numbers, and I think he was probably thinking the best way to get. I can imagine it being when everybody's fit. Werner will be playing centre forward, then it'd be Ziyech on the left, Havertz number 10 just behind, and then Pulisic on the right. And, that's leaving out some pretty good talent there. You've not got Hudson-Odoi involved in the conversation. Abraham, Mount, and the last 2 of which were fantastic for us last season. So I think he's thinking long-term, 4-2-3-1 is going to be the best way to get this team to gel and be really excellent going forward. But of course, with a lot of those players not being available now, you're probably right. Maybe we should have stuck to a 4-3-3 until everybody's fit and gelled, and maybe that would have improved performances. But I think sort of long term, he's definitely looking at what we've got in an attacking sense. There'll be a lot of games, when everybody's fit, we'll probably end up still conceding at the back, but we'll win games 4-3. I think it's going to be exciting sort of times. Touch wood, assuming everybody actually lives up to expectation and performs. But I think that's why he was going for 4-2-3-1 at the start, because that's the intention to play that throughout the season, I think.
Yeah, possibly, Jack. I mean, I think you're interested in talking about us maybe getting done 4-3 or winning 4-3, and that's how the season's going to go. I actually think, kind of irrespective of the formation we play, when we play with a back 4, I actually think there is a bit of a kind of a game management structural thing that goes on with Chelsea at the moment, and I think this might be something we need to really think about if we want to make the most of the talent we've got. And that is, we end up with too many men ahead of the ball. Now, I think you understand why you want players to be attacking the penalty area and so on, but you've got a situation where you've got your forward line players and your fullbacks both ahead of the ball, and you've got some midfielders who are looking to get forward and get on the front foot. You're very often left with only maybe 1 midfielder and a centre backs behind the ball, and I just think sometimes that's not enough, particularly when the central midfield players and I think Kovacic, Kante like to get on the front foot. They don't like to sit and hold. They prefer to go and be proactive. When you've got players who are naturally quite proactive, they get drawn forward as well. And I think one of the problems we have, particularly when both fullbacks go, is we leave ourselves short. So when you lose the ball, it means it's impossible for Kante, it's impossible for Kante, it's impossible for anybody to cover the ground. Plus you've got two centre backs. Obviously you've got big open spaces to defend then. And I do think we might need to look, irrespective of whether we're playing a 2, a 3 and a 1, or whether we're playing 3 and 3, is either making sure the fullbacks are balancing one another, and if one goes, the other's a little more conservative, or having a just keeping the midfielders just back behind the ball as well, and not kind of attacking the edge of the box, but just holding back. I guess it's kind of the Manchester City do it with fullbacks. They usually keep one fullback tucked into midfield to try to support the midfield line so they don't get done in transition. And Liverpool's central midfielders, one of the reasons why Trent and Robertson are so attacking is because the midfield players of Liverpool, if one of them's attacking the box, one of the other ones comes out and kind of joins Fabinho in midfield to make sure they're able to maintain their presence if they lose the ball. And the game of football is a game about losing the ball. The teams turn the ball over, multiple times a game, and it's no good just building your structures around when you've got the ball. You've also got to build on about when you don't have the ball. And I think it's, Guardiola talks about the first 5 seconds after you've lost the ball as being crucial. And I think, that's why Manchester City is so good at tactical fouling. It's because I think the players know that after 5 seconds, the game plan is you commit a tactical foul to slow the game down. Same as Mourinho always used to talk about, it's the team who reorganises best when when there's a transition from one team to the next that will win the game. And I think with Chelsea, I think just our structure when we attack, it's just a bit too overcommitted. And I don't really mind how we do it. If we do it with fullback, we do it with a midfielder, but just a little bit more shape to defend against the transition could make a huge difference.
So, question on Frank Lampard. So you've talked a lot about the formation, you've talked a lot about other managers and their quotes. So is Frank Lampard the right man to lead you forward? Because let's look at the situation. You're talking about the fact that he's only just got these guys in. He hasn't been the manager that long, but he's been manager since July, okay? So July 2019, obviously. And his contract expires in June 2022. Now, if we look at other managers who've come, and fair enough, Ancelotti, we can't really use him because he's fairly experienced at all levels. He's won everything as well. But let's look at Mikel Arteta, who hasn't even managed anybody. So obviously, Frank Lampard managed Derby. Obviously, they didn't get through the playoffs. So if we're doing a kind of comparison, we know that Mikel Arteta didn't know that. Well, he knew some of them maybe, but he wasn't at Arsenal. He was at Man City under Pep, and he didn't leave Arsenal like a year ago. Left 2 years ago. So he's had obviously a different level of success with players obviously who are not necessarily the same level that Chelsea's got in. Also, we beat you in the FA Cup and all the rest of it. But I'm slightly worried for you that do you have the right manager who can handle these big names? I know he's learning his trade, and I know he's a legend, and I know you're going to give him time. But is he the right man to actually do it if you really look at it outside of the fact that he's a legend? Carlos, what I mean, well, Jack, go for it. Jack,
no, I mean, basically, we don't know. It's as simple as that. I mean, great players don't always make great managers. Some do. Clearly, some do. Some are absolutely fantastic. And realistically, only time's going to tell. I mean, I was saying last season when we sort of hired him, it was the wrong appointment at the right time, is what I kept saying. He's only got 1 year's experience under his belt, and that was in the Championship with Derby. But it was a perfect time because he was going to have a free hit. We just lost Hazard, who couldn't replace him, the transfer ban, yada, 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 all these things counting against him. So none of the Chelsea fans were going to give him grief, as long as the senior management at Chelsea in terms of Abramovich were recognising that. He essentially had a free hit last season. And I was actually predicting we'd come somewhere between 6th and 10th. So that's why I was saying even fourth spot. And even though we lost in the final, the fact that we got to the cup final, I thought was an overachievement for what I'd thought at the start of the season. Obviously, that's raised expectation. Everybody now wants more because that's the way it is with football, particularly as we've then really backed him in the transfer market, bought the players that he's wanted. And for once, as I said again to you last week, we seem to actually have a plan and an idea of the way we want to play and what we want to do, and brought people to fit that, rather than just Abramovich buying whoever's the big shiny new star and trying to crowbar, a square peg into a round hole. So that's raised expectations on him. Whether he can deliver on that, genuinely, we don't know. But even then, you get, really good managers going to good clubs, and it still doesn't work. Sometimes it's just, inexplicable as to why these things happen. Lampard's got as much support as any manager at Chelsea has probably ever had, and so it'd be interesting to see if Abramovich will give him the right time, because we know he's usually sort of quite trigger happy. But I think one of the interesting things about that this year has been Peter Cech coming in as a director of football. First sort of real time we've had someone do that sort of properly. I mean, we had Emanalo going around doing things, but he was a bit confusing as to what he was really doing. And I would imagine that Cech will be saying to, if Abramovich is fit, say we get to November, December, and we're only sort of 8th and still struggling to gel and move forward. If that trigger finger is getting itchy on Abramovich, I'm sure Cech's going to say, look, football's about giving managers time, and will act as that buffer that wasn't there before. So we'll get to see, but it's genuinely, to be able to answer that as a question now, I don't think we can really say. Only time will tell.
Okay. Carlos, what do you think as a neutral?
I think that in order to compare Lampard with Arteta, or Arteta with Lampard, I think we have to wait until Arteta completes a full season. I don't think Arsenal, in fact, I'm convinced Arsenal will not break into the top 4 in Arteta's first full season.
Okay.
And Lampard did do it with lesser players, you would say, at least on paper. Now, having done what he did with a team of kids, I mean, Tammy Abraham, Tomori, James, Mount, all of these players, they were not first-team players in the Premier League. And with that side, he was 3rd most of the season. And Chelsea were winning matches, playing well. Pulisic, who had more of a name and had done more at Borussia Dortmund, very good player, excellent player. I think, despite all the signings, I think Chelsea have to find a way of putting Pulisic in the team. So I think Lampard is the right man. And with regards to having to deal with big name players, I think these are big signings, but I don't think any of them are big names yet. This is not the Real Madrid dressing room, and there isn't player power. I think Timo Werner and Kai Havertz probably admire Lampard because they used to see him play when they were kids. They probably picked him when they played PlayStation. So I'm sure Lampard is their idol. So I do think that he's got the authority and he will have the respect of these players. I've got no doubt that he's going to do well. It might take slightly longer than we expected. I did say to you, remember, Malcolm, early on when Chelsea made these signings, that they were going to be fairly close to the top, but they would just be short. Maybe I was overly optimistic about what they would do this season. But I do think that Chelsea are going to get there, and they'll get there with Lampard.
Okay. Wow, that's a shining endorsement. The only thing to add to that,
can I just comment on Lampard as well?
Yeah, go for it.
But I think you're right. I mean, I think as well, when he came in, the club needed a lift. They needed somebody as a manager who's going to give them a lift. I think the experiment with Sarri was quite difficult for many people involved inside the club, and I think his approach just didn't work for the team. I mean, as well as his football being found out fairly quickly, I thought, and the success that Sarri had was largely down to the fact that the 2 best players, Hazard and Kante, didn't stick to his game plan and dribbled and ran with the ball rather than just passing in structured, automated passing patterns. So I think the club needed someone like Lampard who was going to put a smile back on faces in the stands, Jack, as well as I think in on the pitch. I don't know, the games when Sarri was in charge, the bridge was a bit like a morgue, and Lampard brought some energy and joy back there, I thought. As a manager, I think he certainly knows the game. He certainly worked with some of the best and will have picked up experiences that you can't really quantify as in terms of how it's going to affect him. And he's also been there. He's been in a dressing room when you've lost some of the biggest games. He's been in a dressing room when you've won some of the biggest games. He knows what that feels like for a player, and I think that's valuable. What we are seeing is his development as a tactical coach, I think, and that will be interesting to see how he develops getting his ideas across and how he understands how to construct a team to deliver his ideas. And I think the signs are very good. And I'd finish on Lampard by saying, if you want a sign that Lampard is on the right track, then I think you need to look at the fact that Jose Mourinho went out of his way to play some mind games with him after the game this week. Jose wouldn't bother doing that if he didn't think Chelsea were going places. I don't think he would have been offering Frank his critique of his body language against West Brom and all of that if he wasn't trying to dig him in the ribs slightly from that kind of getting a small advantage over him for the rest of the season or for however long they're up against one another. That to me is a good sign. If Jose is going to come after your manager, that's a good sign.
Also, can I just ask a question? Because I think this is important as well, and this is relevant. How long did it take Klopp to get it right?
Yeah.
It took him about 4 years, didn't it?
Yeah.
So it took a number of years of incremental improvement, I think, once he worked out whether his squad could play his football. And there were players that moved on, and there were players that stayed and succeeded, and there were some good players brought in,
I'm not disputing it next time. Anything to add, Jack?
No, it's pretty much as I agree with that. All time will tell. There's an interesting point about Jose's always been very nice to managers and players from teams he doesn't feel threatened by. So Paulie made a good point there that the fact that he wanted to start these mind games with Lampard suggests that he fears him in some way. Not necessarily fears him, but he thinks, right, I've got to eke out just this little advantage here. If maybe that's winding him up for the rest of the season, that when he plays us in the 2 games now, he'll do something different because he wants to get one over on me. That's typical Jose. And that's why he was always picking fights with Wenger and others. The only opposition manager that he didn't pick fights with in that sense was Ferguson, who he greatly respected. But everybody else, it was like, right, I'm going to start a little rumble with him because I fear. And that's possibly what he's done there with Lampard.
Actually, I think what must be going through his mind, because Mourinho always says he's Chelsea's best ever manager, he must be worried that if Lampard equals what he did, having been the player he was, people are going to love him much more than Mourinho, if they still love Mourinho at Chelsea. And I actually doubt that.
Well, I think his second stint really didn't help him. I mean, I think obviously winning the league in his second stint was actually quite an achievement with the squad that he had. But certainly it all went a bit wrong after that. And I think Mourinho's his style is so intense, isn't it, as a manager? I don't know, maybe it's matured a little now, maybe it's changed a little now as he's got older, but his style is so intense, it's so much circle the wagons, the world's against us, and it's really kind of like every day is a crisis day, and that's how he gets the best. That kind of pitch of tension is how he gets his squad to operate. It just must be so tiring after 2 or 3 seasons of living with that, and I think it's why some excellent players have just not worked at all with Mourinho. For every Drogba, Lampard, Terry, Carvalho, he's got a De Bruyne and a Salah and a Lukaku who didn't really work very well with them. And I think it's, I think that's his style, and I think he knows that. And I think he's quite happy to have good players that can't work with him. He'll just find another one that can.
Yeah, and even players he brings in, he has trouble with. Look at Pogba. And also in general, he doesn't, as we know, stay at clubs very long anyway. That's probably why. So he's probably exhausted himself with his own style of management. He has to leave and take a break or go somewhere else to give someone else some stress. So yeah, it's an interesting one. So to kind of finish, boys. So realistically, what does good look like for Chelsea this season? So I'll start with you, Carlos. What does good like, or what does an A+ for them look like? What will get Frank Lampard a pat on the back from his managers and the people around him and his players? What do you think?
I think 3rd or 4th.
Okay.
I think they can't break into the top two,
Mm.
not just yet, maybe next season. But to get back into the Champions League, to reduce the gap, as Steve was saying, that will be good enough. If Chelsea finish, say, 10, 12 points behind the champions and get into the Champions League, I think that would have been a great season.
Mhm.
And it would be very positive with a view to the following season.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I would agree. I think third is probably we want to be clearly the best of the rest would be a good season for us, I think. But as you say, third or fourth is ideal. For me, actually, the interesting one is I'd like to see us concede 10 fewer goals and score 10 more goals in the league. I think if we can improve the goal difference by 20 goals, that to me would be a sign of a movement in the right direction. And I think we've got the players there. We've got a better goalkeeper now. We've got Thiago Silva's organisation in defence, a better fullback, and we've invested up the top of the pitch as well. So for me, I think the Champions League as well, getting out the group stages and demonstrating that we're a beyond Christmas European team. I think that also sends an important signal for the future and any signings for next year. But ultimately, yeah, for me, Champions League qualification is a successful season. Improved goal difference at from both ends of the pitch, improved points which would come with that improved goal difference, getting closer to the top two, the cups, the FA Cup is a well, if we get to the final, great. If we win it, fantastic. If we don't, it's neither here nor there. Jack, what do you reckon, mate?
Largely echoing all of that. I mean, it's really difficult to see us being able to overtake either Liverpool or City because they were so sort of far ahead. It'd be nice to just close that gap down, finishing third. It'd be good. I think fourth would be acceptable, but we'd really want to sort of get into third. Certainly, as again getting out the Champions League group. I think with the group draw that's happened just now, you look at the group, we should really be getting out of that anyway. And then it's a case of a bit of luck in who you draw. If we draw Bayern Munich next round, well, we're in trouble, aren't we? But it's trying to progress as far as possible in the Champions League, and then we really need to take the FA Cup seriously. Having got knocked out now, the League Cup, it's effectively our only chance of silverware this year. So we really want to give that a good, our best of British go at it. Really make sure that we don't rest too many players in the games and whatnot, because effectively that's our only route for silverware this year, as it were. So, I think, again, third or fourth Champions League qualification, a decent run in both the cups, and that'll be more than sufficient for the season.
Yeah, and just an addition, I just thought about that, the Champions League. So Chelsea and Group E, you've got Sevilla, Krasnodar, and Rennes. How do you think you're going to do? Do you think you're going to get out? Is that realistic? What's your thoughts, Carlos? I mean, that's Sevilla. Obviously, we know what they did last year. Your favourite team winning the Europa League again.
I was sick and tired of them winning the Europa League. Yeah.
Well, in previous episodes, if anyone watched previous episode, we've had a very thorough chat about Sevilla and Europa League. So have a look at that. But yeah, how do you think Chelsea's going to do?
Oh, they'll definitely come through. Yeah. Okay. Chelsea and Sevilla will come through that group. Even though Rennes might be the surprise package, we don't know. I haven't actually seen them this season, but they've won, I think, every match except for one that they drew. So, they do have some good young players. I think Camavinga is an up-and-coming star. Fantastic player. Real Madrid are after him. And you never know. Maybe Rennes will be the surprise package, and they'll... But if they put someone out, I don't think it'll be Chelsea. I think it would be Sevilla.
Okay, good. Steve?
Yeah, well, it's the sort of group when you look at the pots before the draw and you think, well, that wouldn't be a bad group. I mean, obviously Krasnodar are a bit of an unknown package. We don't quite know what we're going to get with them, but not from one of Europe's stronger leagues. So you would like to think that Chelsea would be able to comfortably, their class would tell out in 2 games against them. Sevilla are a good team. Again, have got some good players. Got Rakitic back there this season, so they've got some European pedigree players as well as obviously the successful Europa League. But they're one of those teams again that turn players over. So they've sold Reguilón to Spurs. So what will that do to their back four? Obviously, he was on loan from Real Madrid last season, but so I guess they would always have to replace him. But yeah, not quite sure with Sevilla how good they'll be. I mean, they're a decent team, of course, but You would like to think Chelsea and Seville would be quite comfortable in that group, but as you say, Rennes, although Chelsea have now signed their goalkeeper, so that's they'll be thrilled about that as they look on the draw. Yeah, potentially a good team. The French league, I think, is often a little underrated. I think that obviously some of the weaker teams in the Championnat are probably not a Premier League standard, but I think the teams a good league and team is usually a good side, and you know, well coached, well drilled, with good players, even though they might not be household names. So Rennes might be ones to watch out. Be interesting to see what the draw of the actual games and the order of the games is, because I think it would be quite nice to finish with Krasnodar at home in that group, just to be on the safe side.
Finally, Jack, what's your thoughts?
Pretty much the same. I mean, it's I think we'd do well not to underestimate Sevilla. You know, the fact that you look at what Bayern Munich have been doing to people recently, blasting everybody out the water 6, 7, 8-0, all these sort of things. Could only beat Sevilla 2-1. And so we'd do well not to underestimate them, otherwise we'll come a cropper. So I think it'd be us to battle it out for first and second. I'd hope to, you know, touch wood that we're, you know, again, with the investment we've made, if we can gel in time, that's the big question we've already been sort of talking about, that we'd be able to get enough results out of them to top the group. Rennes has said, now that they've got their goalkeeper, shoot from distance. Just keep shooting, testing whoever the new goalkeeper is. I'm sure we'll be okay with them. At Krasnodar, I mean, it's, again, talk about an unknown quantity. You got to think they're going to struggle in the group. You'd have thought they'll be the whipping boys, and it'll be just, you know, see how it goes. See, you know, I'm fairly confident we should be at least be able to come top two, if not top.
Brilliant. Excellent. Good stuff. Well, thank you so much, boys. It's been a thorough chat about Chelsea. It all sounds positive, to be honest. We'll see what happens with Chelsea if they can actually keep that up. But thank you always, boys, for joining us. It's been a pleasure. So we'll stop there. And so thanks for talking about Chelsea. We'd like to hear your thoughts on the matter. Are Chelsea really going to do well? Are they going to finish third or fourth? Are they going to do even better than that? Who knows? And also, what do you think they'll do in the Champions League? Are they going to do fantastic? Or are they going to come out no problem at all? Are they going to be surprised? We shall find out soon enough. But yeah, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you for listening